Senator Sanders, thanks so much for being with us. We really appreciate it. Let's start with a little bit of news today. Hillary Clinton said yesterday that she was tired of you lying about this charge that you've made for quite a while now about fossil fuel donations. What's your response to that?
There it is.
There it is.
My response is that according to Greenpeace, Secretary Clinton has received, let's get this thing right, $4.5 million from lobbyists, bundlers, and large donors connected to the fossil fuel industry. That is Greenpeace, not me, and they've examined the campaign finance records. Secretary Clinton has refused to say what I have said, is that she will not take money from the fossil fuel industry. So what you got is, as I recall, over 50 lobbyists. And here's the important point. The Clinton people, I have to say, are good spinners. In every industry in the world, there's going to be a worker who makes a contribution. So what? That's not the problem. The problem is that she has had over 50 paid lobbyists, people who have lobbied for the industry, making contributions to her campaign. 43 of those have maxed out, provided the maximum amount of contributions. So when the secretary says, I don't get any contributions from the corporations per se, no kidding, you can't, it's illegal. But she has received, as I've indicated, according to Greenpeace, some $4.5 million.
Let's move on to another question. Since you began your campaign, ISIS or ISIS-inspired attacks have taken dozens of lives in places like San Bernardino, Paris, and Brussels.
Yes.
What would your approach be to combating terrorism?
Well, twofold. Number one, ISIS is a barbaric organization that has to be destroyed on the battlefield. The good news is that in the last year or so, ISIS has lost approximately 40% of the territory it controlled in Iraq, and I believe it's on the defensive in Syria as well. I agree with King Abdullah of Jordan that at the end of the day, what we're looking at is a war over the soul of Islam, and that Muslim nations themselves are going to have to win that war. So I believe that it must be Muslim troops on the ground with the strong support of the United States, the UK, France, Germany, etc., and Russia.
Support in what way, Senator?
Would you want
air
US
attack,
troops on the ground?
No, not air attacks, the training of troops, military supplies, of course. No, I will do everything that I can to make sure that the United States does not get involved in a perpetual war in the Middle East. So I am opposed to putting our ground troops into combat. On the other hand, special forces, the training of troops, that's another story.
James?
Hi, Senator. One thing that you talk about is, the mass incarceration crisis that exists.
Yeah.
In Wisconsin, we have one of the highest black male incarceration rates in the nation. What's your plan for addressing that issue?
Great question. And when I, during this campaign, I focused on a number of issues, but primarily I've headlined, in a sense, three major issues. Number one, a corrupt campaign finance system, which allows increasingly billionaires and wealthy people to buy elections. Number two, a rigged economy. And number three, what I call a broken criminal justice system. So to answer your question, right now we have 2.2 million people in jail. And everybody should take a deep breath and recognize that that is more people in jail than any other country on earth. China, 4 times our size, communist authoritarian country, we have more people in jail than China. All right, what do we do? For a start, this is a long answer. All right, I'll try to abbreviate it, but it's an important question. For a start, we try to prevent people from getting into jail in the first place. What does that mean? It means that youth unemployment in this country, an issue that we have not focused on enough, for high school graduates, I'm not talking about dropouts, high school graduates who are unemployed or underemployed. For white kids between 17 and 20, numbers 33%, unemployed, underemployed. Latino kids, 36%, African American kids, 51%. So what my view is, and I've worked with Congressman John Conyers of Michigan on this, we invest in education and jobs. We focus on those kids rather than jails and incarceration, all right? Number two, I think we've got to take a hard look at the so-called war on drugs. In the last 30 years, many millions of Americans have received police records for possession of marijuana, for example. If you are a 19-year-old black kid and you have a police record for marijuana, you know what? It's going to make it hard for you to get a job. You don't get a job, you don't have any income. You don't have any income, you're going to get into trouble, or you might get into trouble. So I think we have to rethink the war on drugs. Right now, marijuana is listed as a Schedule I drug under the Federal Controlled Substance Act, along with heroin. I think that's totally absurd. I have legislation that takes marijuana out of that. Number three, I think what you are seeing in many communities in this country is abuse by police departments and over-policing. For example, turns out that blacks and whites do marijuana at about the same rates, according to studies. Blacks are 4 times more likely to be arrested. So I think we have got to demilitarize police departments. I think you got to make police departments look like the communities they serve. Too often they are acting as oppressive forces within communities rather than being part of the communities. When I talk about making public colleges and universities tuition-free, that is a pipeline to education, to opportunity, rather than to jail. So there's a lot that has to be done, but this is a major, major issue on my agenda.
Let me ask you about your proposal for free college tuition, which you pay for by taxing Wall Street. Is it really a good idea to subsidize families who actually can afford it?
Yes, it is.
And talk about the effect on private institutions like Marquette University.
Fantastic. Good question. This is the way I approach the problem. For 100 years or more, I should find the exact date, somebody can help me, we have had 100 years or so ago, people fought an incredible battle, pretty radical idea, that says that all kids in America, regardless of income, should have a free public education. Now think about 100 years, it's a pretty radical idea. The world has changed, as we all know. And today, as a result of a changing economy and changing technology, it is an absolute fact that people need more education. In fact, you could argue that a college degree today, in certain respects, is the equivalent of what a high school degree was 50 years ago in terms of job opportunities. So to answer your question, when I look at public education, I don't think we should just stop at the 12th grade now. The world has changed. And I think we should make public colleges and universities. Sometimes people think I'm talking about all schools. I'm not. Public colleges and universities, tuition-free. I think what that will do is end the real serious crisis that we face of millions of people in America now really struggling with, in some cases, very high levels of student debt. I mean, you talk to people that are paying off debts for decades, can't buy a home, can't buy a car, can't get married, can't have kids. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Okay, so what I'm just talking about here is an expansion of the concept of public education in a changing world.
Would you go 4 years, 2 years?
4 years, yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
16 years of
Yes,
public
exactly,
education.
16 years, that is the change.
Okay.
In terms of private schools like Marquette or every other private college in America, we also are prepared to substantially help by increasing Pell Grants, improving and expanding work-study opportunities, and providing other financial assistance. So this is not an attack on private schools. There are a lot of people, for a lot of reasons, want to go to private schools, and we have some great private colleges and universities in America. But the goal here is not only to see that kids do not leave school deeply in debt. It's more important. I come from a family that did not have a lot of money. My father dropped out of high school. My mom never went to college. I want every kid in Wisconsin and in Vermont and in America, and this is pretty radical, to understand that college is something that they can achieve if they do their schoolwork, if they take school seriously. And I want the teachers and the parents to know that. that regardless of the income of a child, if you study hard and do well in school, you will be able to get a college education. And I believe that will have a significant impact on education in the elementary and secondary level.
But if you're elected, you can't do this by yourself. You'll need to get it through Congress. How do you convince Congress that this, or your other ideas, are good ideas?
Okay, great, excellent question. And let me answer it in a couple of ways. First, if I get elected, it will mean that there will have been a very large voter turnout. That's just a fact. One of the things that we are trying to do in this campaign, or what I call a political revolution, is to revitalize American democracy. You will recall that in the last midterm election we had in 2014, 63% of the American people did not vote. 80% of young people did not vote. What we are doing in this campaign, with, I think, some success, is beginning the process of revitalizing American democracy. We will have, within a week or two, about 1 million people coming out to our rallies all over this country. And you're seeing a lot of young people and working class people who have never before participated in the political process. So answer the first question, if I win, my guess is the Democrats will regain the United States Senate based on that large voter turnout. Number two, and they'll do better in the House. Whether they can win the House or not, don't know. But the more important answer is I have worked with Republicans my entire political career. In fact, there were many years when I was in the House where I passed more amendments on the floor of the House with Republicans than any other member of the House. I passed a couple of years ago with John McCain and a Republican House the most comprehensive veterans health care legislation in recent history. But at the end of the day, what this campaign is about is calling for millions of people through a political revolution to begin the process of engaging in a deep way in the political process in a way that we have not seen for a very long time. And the way change has always come about in this country is when millions of people stand up and fight back. That's the history of the union movement, the women's movement, the civil rights movement, gay rights movement. And I believe we are at that moment right now. So to answer your question, if millions of young people and their parents and citizens say, you know what, I don't want my kid graduating $50,000 in debt. That's wrong. You better pass that legislation. It will be passed.
But on your tax plan, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's 15 trillion it raises over 10 years. That's a big number.
That's a 15 trillion. I think that started with the Wall Street Journal.
Okay.
Okay, and don't always read everything you read in believe in your paper, but not necessarily the Wall Street Journal.
But
You're never wrong. They're always, yeah.
On your tax plan, though, it does require higher taxes,
Yes, it
even
does.
on middle income people. So how do you justify that and you're asking people to bet on the come, aren't you?
Bet on the,
Bet on the come. Bet that government will give you more.
well,
so
here's
that-
the answer. Okay, let me answer it in two
So you
ways.
have to pay more.
What the Wall Street Journal did, and which I've been having to answer to for many, many months now, I think they thought it was 18 trillion over a 10-year period, if my memory is correct.
Okay.
And that included 15 of that 18 was healthcare. All right? So put aside the 3 trillion, which they were right on, $15 trillion on healthcare. I am asking you, a middle-class person, to pay approximately $500 a year or less, and I should know the number, more in taxes. You know what you're going to get? For that, you're going to get a reduction in your health care cost of $5,000 a year. Pardon me?
5,000?
$5,000 for that family right in the middle of the economy, okay? For your business, I presume everybody here at the paper has insurance, all right? We will save you substantial sums of money. Would you rather pay a little more in taxes and not have the enormous health care cost you have? I think most people would. Now, what I have faced in my life, because I've long been an advocate of a Medicare for All single-payer program, I've had the 30-second ads. Bernie Sanders wants to raise your taxes. Somehow that ad ends without saying Bernie Sanders wants to completely do away with your private health insurance premiums. I don't know why they didn't squeeze that into the ad. But that's what politics is about, and I have to deal with that.
Right.
The other thing that we are trying to do also, and this I freely admit.
So how do you deal with that, though? I mean, the anti-tax thing is thick in this Congress.
But
right
the
now.
private insurance, healthcare, soaring costs is also pretty high. And this is how I answer it, okay? And I'll answer it right now. The United States is the only major country on earth that doesn't guarantee healthcare to all people. That's a fact, okay? Each system is different. I'm 50 miles away from Canada. They have a single-payer system. The UK has a different system. Number two, the cost of healthcare in the United States per person is way, way, way higher than any other country. No one talks about that. So you're asking me about taxes. What about the fact that we are paying per person almost 3 times more than the British, 50% more than the French, okay? So, and then when you look at the system, probably everybody in this room, I don't know how good your policy is, probably has a deductible and a copayment, right? You're paying that out of your own pocket. It's going on all over America. We pay the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs because they could double the price of your medicine tomorrow, and there is no legislation to stop them from doing that. And we got 29 million people uninsured despite the gains of the Affordable Care Act, of which I worked on, by the way. So I think it's a good deal for the American people to do what every other major country on earth is doing. Guarantee health care to all people, comprehensive health care through a Medicare for all system, save middle-class families substantial sums of money, and make sure that all of us have health care as a right.
Mary, do you want to jump?
Yeah, so Hillary Clinton also went after you about abortion, and this was her quote. Last night, Senator Sanders
I know
agreed...
the quote, you don't have to read
Okay,
it.
great.
I've heard it
So
12
are you
times.
saying she was trying to present that you were saying it's not a serious
Of course,
issue in
that's
the
not.
race?
Let me say this again. Hillary Clinton has a dozen people whose function in life is to spin. So any word that I say here, any word that gets written up will be spun tomorrow to be something different. And I take that one, a little bit of umbrage on that one. I have 100% lifetime voting record regarding a woman's right to choose. This is an issue I take very, very seriously. The context of that statement was on a Rachel Maddow show, where Rachel asked me, this is what Donald Trump said. And essentially, as I recall, what I said is, I'm tired of having to respond every day to one or another moronic statements that Donald Trump says. All right, maybe today he's announced that the moon is made out of blue cheese, or green cheese, or red cheese, or cheddar cheese, I don't know what. And then we have to spend through Wisconsin cheddar. Wisconsin cheddar is really, this is a major scientific discovery that Donald Trump has given us. And I got to spend 2 days talking about whether that's accurate or not. His statement was reprehensible, it was disgusting, it was awful. I said it was shameful. And then I said, you know what? Donald Trump every day is in the newspapers talking about something else absurd. I don't want to spend my life doing that. I want to deal with the real issues facing the American people. That becomes twisted in a sense of me not thinking that a woman's right to choose is a serious issue. I think it is an enormously serious issue, okay? And let me just suggest to you, not only will I, if elected president, defend a woman's right to choose, I will take on Governor Walker and other governors throughout this country who are working overtime trying to restrict that choice. I find it absolutely hypocritical for right-wing governors to tell us how much they hate the government, how they want to cut Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, the EPA. Get government out of our lives. How often have we heard that? Except if you're a woman having to make a very personal choice, then they love government to get involved in that choice for every woman in America. So I will stand firm with the women of this country and protect their right to choose. And I am disappointed that Secretary Clinton and her staff of many chose to spin that in the way they did.
Thank you.
Where would you rank President Obama among presidents in your lifetime?
At a pretty high level. I would say FDR was one of the great presidents in our history. If we understand, which my Republican friends choose not to, where this country was on the day that Obama was inaugurated, and it's amazing how quickly we forget that. Every day I'm hearing from our Republicans, well, we only created 200,000 jobs this month, not enough. We were losing 800,000 jobs a month when Obama came into office. That's when Bush left office. We had a $1.4 trillion deficit, largest deficit in history, and the world's financial system was on the verge of collapse. Where are we today? Are we where we want to be? No, we're not where we want to be. and I talk about that every day. But we have come a long way in the last 7.5 years, and Obama, Joe Biden, and Democratic leadership deserves a lot of credit for that.
What's
In
your
my
what's your biggest disappointment in his presidency?
Well, a couple. I was on the floor for over 8 hours in opposition. I was the first modern filibuster of sorts in years. In opposition, this extension of tax breaks for Bush's tax breaks for the wealthy. I disagree with Obama on the TPP. And I think, frankly, while he's doing more now, getting back to the question that you asked me a little while ago on criminal justice, I think he could have been more aggressive. He has done some good things now, and I think it was courageous for him to go to a jail in Oklahoma, federal jail. I think he could have been stronger on that issue as well. Those are some of the areas where I would disagree with him.
Your campaign has taken a number of people by surprise, I think, but you still got a rough road to get to the nomination. How do you get there?
Well, it would be of great help to me if there was a large turnout on Tuesday here, and we won this state. That would give us some momentum, and it would give us some delegates. And that would take us into New York City and New York State, where I think we have a shot to win. Secretary Clinton, of course, was senator there for 8 years. But the polling suggests that we are closing the gap. And I'm not mistaken, our favorabilities actually are better than hers in her own state. So I think we got a shot to win there. And here is the point about delegate count. Let me be the first to admit that we have done disastrously in the Deep South. We were beaten very badly in all of the states, and she collected a whole lot of delegates. But what I said back then and what I said now is that once you're out of the Deep South and you're heading west, we begin to do a little bit better. The Democratic Party is a little bit more progressive outside of the Deep South. We have now won 6 out of the last 7 caucuses, and Democrats abroad. We'll see how we do here on Tuesday, and then we're going into New York. I think we did very, very well in Washington. I think we can win Oregon. I think we got a good chance to do well in California. So a lot of, you got Pennsylvania out there, a lot of big states with a lot of delegates, and I think we can do well.
How important is Wisconsin?
It's very important.
What do you need to do?
To get 98% of the vote.
There you go.
But I don't think we will. Actually, I'd like 100%, but somebody told me that we're not going to vote for me.
That's too much.
That's too much. Look, we want to do as well as we can. We're here. As soon as I leave here, we're going to go to Sheboygan and another event later tonight. We are working very, very hard in your beautiful state, and we hope to do as well as
The
we
issue
can.
of superdelegates, though, Clinton has a huge advantage
Yes.
there, and they're kind of locked up. How do you surmount that?
Not so sure they're locked up. I mean, that's a fair question. Here's what I think. I don't know the exact numbers. She has, 300 or 400? There are several hundred who have not yet committed. So I think that if people at this point have not yet committed, there is a reasonable chance for us to get a good number of those. But here is the interesting point. In those states, and states like Alaska, where we won 82% of the vote, or Washington, where we won, I don't remember, 73% of the vote, we are going to say to those superdelegates, you know what? You don't have to, but you should vote with the people of your state. The people of the state have, in an overwhelming way, have said they wanted Bernie Sanders, and some of those superdelegates are doing that, to be honest with you. And then the point that we're going to make to the superdelegates who came out, in many cases, very early, for Hillary Clinton, even before I was in the race, is the following. Hillary Clinton and I have our differences of opinion, strong differences of opinion, but we are certainly in agreement that we do not want to see a Republican in the White House. And I think I can make the case, absolutely objectively, that I am the strongest Democratic candidate to defeat Trump or any other Republican who might be the nominee. And that's not me. You take a look at all of the polling that's out there. Look at the last CNN poll out there, had me 20 points ahead of Trump. She was, I think, 12 points ahead. I think there was a poll that just came out in Wisconsin, which is not dissimilar from other state polls, which had me doing a lot better than she against Trump and other Republican candidates. So the argument that we will make is that, in fact, going into a general election, and I say this with no disrespect, Hillary Clinton is not a particularly strong Democratic candidate for president. For whatever reasons, I'm not going to get into. Her unfavorable ratings are very, very high. I think there's no poll that you can look at where my favorable ratings are not a lot higher. I always do better among independents than she does, and I suspect we will get a surprising number of Republican votes as well. So that's the case that we will make to superdelegates who, yes, they may want Hillary, but more importantly, don't want Trump, that's for sure.
So you would agree with Trump on almost anything, but in a very broad way, you both agree that trade is a problem. So
Yes.
what would you, we have companies here, Johnson Controls is one who's been part of the Hillary campaign, and others who do a lot of trade abroad.
Yes.
It's very important to our heavy
Yes.
manufacturers. So
Yes.
what can you do to assure them that your policies wouldn't hurt their businesses and thus hurt jobs?
Yes. Let me answer that in two ways. First of all, no sane human being doesn't understand that we live in a global economy and that trade is a natural outpouring of living in a responsive living in a global economy, and the trade is a good thing. I would, and I believe in that. So please don't put me into the camp that thinks we build a wall around America. That is nothing that I've ever believed in. But if you look objectively, in my view, now I know people disagree on this as well, but the economists that I respect will tell you that trade policies like NAFTA, PNTR with China, have cost this country millions of decent paying jobs. And now also, when factories shut down, there are often a number of factors, and I'm not telling you that trade is the only one. We have lost almost 60,000 factories in this country since 2001. Not all of that is attributable to trade, but a lot of it is. So what do I believe? I believe not in the concept of unfettered free trade, where American workers are forced to compete against people who make 70 cents an hour. That's just not fair. I believe in fair trade. And I believe that under fair trade policies, manufacturers in Wisconsin will fare very, very well as manufacturers all over the country. But I do believe we have got to end policies which say that an American worker has got to work against people who are working for very low wages in countries where there are no environmental standards. I mean, if you're a manufacturer in this country, you got to obey environmental legislation. You may have to negotiate with a union. You go to some other countries, there are no unions. There are no environmental standards. That's just not fair. That is not fair. American workers should not be put into that position. So we will change in a fundamental way our trade policies to make them not unfettered free trade, but fair trade.
So are tariffs part of the deal?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the weapon that you have. Otherwise, I don't know what you have.
Do you have specifics for how you'd measure the cost of the environmental protections and the labor?
I don't have specifics, but let me give you a generality. I mean, if you're a company X and you're paying your workers in Wisconsin $20 an hour, you have to have anti-pollution mechanisms on your the emissions that you have. That costs you money, right? But people of Wisconsin and America want to breathe air that's reasonably clean and drink water that's not polluted. And it costs money to prevent that from happening. And then you go to another country, perhaps China, where they don't have those standards. I think that cost has got to be put into the equation. And I think wages have got to be put into that equation. And that's the kind of foundation that I would look at in terms of what constitutes fair trade policies. I'm going to give you one example. As part of the TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership, there is it's Malaysia, where workers in Malaysia are coming from other countries. They're coming into Malaysia. Their passports are taken away, and they are treated like indentured servants. Should American workers have to compete against people in that condition? I think not.
You talked earlier about health care
Yes.
and Medicare for all,
Yep.
and you raised a good point about health care costs, which are astronomical. What would you do? What policies would you put in place to slow that down?
Good. Oh, we don't have the hours that we need for
Yeah,
this.
all right.
That's one I've been thinking
I was
about.
on your website. You have a lot of ideas.
All right. Just examples, such obvious examples. In healthcare, as in criminal justice, by not investing in prevention, we end up spending a lot more, all right? So if you don't invest in education or jobs for a kid, the kid ends up in jail, a life is destroyed, and you're spending a lot more money. What about healthcare? It's the same thing. Unbelievably, in America today, 1 out of 5 people cannot even afford to pay for the prescription drugs their doctors prescribe. 1 out of 5 people. This is insane. Forget anything else. If you don't get the medicine, what do? You get sicker. And then you end up in the emergency room, all right? I helped lead the effort in the Affordable Care Act in primary health care. And when you talk about the dysfunctionality of the American healthcare system, primary health care, along with prescription drug costs, probably the 2 major issues, all right? Right now, even if you have insurance, forget about the 29 million people who are uninsured or the many more who are underinsured, it is very difficult for people to find a primary care physician when they need it. In the Affordable Care Act, I got $12 billion into the ACA to expand what we call federally qualified community health centers, and I'm sure you have many of them here in Wisconsin. And they're pretty good models of what primary care should be. You walk in there, regardless of your income. They accept Medicaid, of course. If you don't have any health insurance, it's a sliding scale. You have dental care, which is a major crisis in this country, by the way. I don't know about Wisconsin, but in my state, affordable dental care is a very serious problem. We don't have enough dentists, et cetera. Mental health counseling, not to mention general primary care, 4 components of it. It is about, my last information I received, if I am sick in Milwaukee and I don't have a doctor, where do I go? I go to the emergency room, right? That will cost Medicaid 10 times more than it would for me to go to a community health center. How is that about a stupid way to spend money? And I don't have a doctor on a regular basis, okay? And I can't afford prescription drugs. So putting an emphasis on primary health care, so people get to a doctor when they need it, rather than get sicker, end up in the emergency room or end up in the hospital, that investment will keep people healthier and save money. Number 2, and the Obama people are trying to do this, putting an emphasis on nutrition, on exercise, making a healthier population, work as aggressively as we can against smoking. I was in the Bronx yesterday. I was told in a low-income community in the South Bronx that as a result of pollution in the air, 1 out of 4 children has asthma. Minority children, by the way. Now, forget about the human elements of a poor kid having asthma. What about the cost associated with that? All right, okay, I apologize, we're going to get to Sheboygan, but fireware, All right, so what I'm suggesting is those are just the simple ways, not to mention time and time again, we're investing in high-tech stuff. We have too much of that stuff. It's overused. There are so many ways that we can cut healthcare costs, but the goal here is that healthcare can't be a system designed to make profits for the drug companies or the insurance companies. It has got to be the highest quality possible in a cost-effective way, because I personally believe healthcare is a right of all people.
Senator, I think we have to leave it there. Thanks for your time. We really appreciate it.
I apologize. I wish we had more time. I really do, but
We do
we probably
too.
have a few thousand people waiting for us in Sheboygan. All right, maybe we can do this again if you'd like, but thank you so
Great.
much.